Hey guys, welcome to a Burton TD podcast. Tony, I'm pretty excited. First time we're able to do a virtual podcast here, so I'm excited about it. Tony, we're halfway through the Eagles preseason now, so I think it's a good point for us to kind of touch down, figure out about the Birds. We got some new Eagles there, Tony. So what are you seeing? What do you like? What don't you like?
Well, for the first time in legitimately, I don't know, a handful of years, the Eagles have a legitimate cornerback on their roster. Now, that doesn't mean he's a shutdown guy or Pro Bowler or anything by that mean, but Ronald Darby is definitely a capable corner in this league. He's probably a 2 or a 3 on a good team, but for this season, he'll be the Eagles' number 1 corner. Because the rest of the guys, Mills, Douglas, Robinson, C.J. Smith, you really don't know what you're getting out of any of them. Sidney Jones probably isn't going to play till next year. At least shouldn't play till next year, recovering from his ACL. It is what it is. I will say they gave up a lot for him. They really did. But then again, he is a 22-year-old cornerback who has proven himself in this league. He didn't have a very good year last year, but his rookie year was pretty darn good. He looked good in his first preseason game against the Bills. He missed a tackle against Shady McCoy in the open field, but then the next series he picked off a Tyrod Taylor pass, and Eagles Twitter exploded. People were comparing them to the '85 Bears. People were asking, "Is this going to be a top 10, top 5 defense? How many sacks are they going to have?" And I got really fucking pissed off because that is just absurd. I don't want to go too far into this because you're laughing at me, but it's Tyrod fucking Taylor and second preseason game in a few series. So I just want everybody to pump the brakes. The defense has a shot to be good. The defense does not have a shot to be great. I'm sorry. There's just not enough impact players to be comparing this defense to great defenses of the past. Maybe in a couple years, if these guys stick together and Sidney Jones is who we think he is, and Derek Barnett turns into a great pass rusher, and Hicks turns into an all-pro linebacker, then we could start saying maybe this defense has a chance to be great. But for this year, let's try to get into the top 15 first. Let's just do that. And if the defense improves and Wentz makes a big step forward, then the Eagles are headed in the right direction.
I think you're pretty much spot on there, Tony. I think when we look at Ronald Darby here, I mean, he's been a career number 2. Now, he's 22 years old, so he's still got a lot of upside in his game, and he's still under a 2-year contract, doesn't get out until 2018. So the Birds got a nice option there. I mean, realistically, I think you and me agree, Tony. It didn't really look like they were going to re-sign Jordan Matthews once his contract came up. So why not trade him to go ahead and get a corner? I get that. Not a big fan of trading the draft pick. That's kind of more where my concern is. But I understand, too, hey, you didn't have anything that was solidified as a defensive back there. So I get the Ronald Darby trading, but let's kind of take a quick pause here. He had a great start. Yeah, he got an interception. He got an interception off a middle-of-the-pack quarterback in the NFL. Fine. I mean, I'm not saying that to belittle him, but I'm also saying let's not start, thinking that he's going to be the next Deion Sanders and lock half the field down. He's a number 2 corner in a good team. I think that's spot on, Tony. And then we're seeing Derek Barnett kind of grow, and he's had a pretty good preseason. Would you agree with that so far?
Yeah, from what I've seen from Barnett in the preseason games, yeah, he's been getting after the quarterback. With that said, he's been going up against other teams' second team tackles. So it is what it is, but I think the defensive line coach mentioned the other day that he's still number 2 on the depth chart. I think we're going to see that change pretty fast. I would imagine within the first month of the season, you'll see him and Brandon Graham starting together, and then Vinny Curry and Chris Long will be the 2 backups. And both of them will get their share of reps, no doubt. But it's looking pretty clear to me that the 2 best DNs on the team are Derek Barnett and Brandon Graham.
Yeah, I don't think there's any question about those are the 2 best defensive ends. I mean, if we're realistic, Vinny Curry isn't the number two defensive end. His contract is. I mean, if it wasn't for Vinny Curry's contract situation, he's probably on his way out. But, kudos to his agent. Hey, get paid, man. And that's what he did. So, the Eagles are going to keep giving him a shot because financially they're already on the hook unless they can find someone to make a trade for him, which not really likely. So
Yeah, that's a good point. Vinny Curry's getting paid like a starter. Also, another thing about Vinny Curry and Brandon Graham, they're both older than I think most Eagles fans realize. Brandon Graham, I believe, is 29 or 30, and I'm pretty sure Vinny Curry is 30. Chris Long is 32. So, I mean, if you're looking at this defense a couple years down the line, which realistically is what they should be doing, Derek Barnett is really the only guy you could probably say, yeah, okay, he's definitely part of our future. I know there's some people who are saying, oh, Brandon Graham is going to be one of those guys who gets better with age. And you have seen pass rushers um, that play well, kind of peak, so to speak, when they're 30, 31. But I wouldn't count on that either. I do kind of want to go back to what you were saying before about the Jordan Matthews, Ronald Darby trade. Yeah, they traded for a guy that they definitely weren't going to re-sign in Jordan Matthews, but the third-round pick absolutely hurts. Of course, the other side to that argument is, well, with that third-round pick, don't you want to get a guy like Ronald Darby, a 22-year-old cornerback that can play? So in that sense, I get it. I just want to caution by saying that, yeah, Jordan Matthews wasn't going to be worth what he was going to make on the open market, but let's also not forget Jordan Matthews was clearly Carson Wentz's favorite target, was probably his best friend on the team by most accounts. And everybody is just assuming that Nelson Aguilar is going to step in and play that slot role and be fine and be able to catch the ball this year. And that's also assuming that Alshon Jeffrey is going to be able to stay healthy and that Torrey Smith is going to be able to have a renaissance of his career, so to speak. So I feel like everybody's thinking, oh, this wide receiving core has so much depth because, then you got the rookies, Matt Collins, and everybody likes Marcus Johnson too. And it's just like, none of these guys, they basically have two guys who have ever proven anything in their career, and Alshon Jeffrey and Torrey Smith. And one of them is coming off by far his worst year of his career. So, I think the Eagles deep down are counting a lot on Zach Ertz this year and are really betting that, Sproles could stay healthy again and even Pumphrey could come out of the backfield and catch passes this year. I think they want those two guys to play the slot a little bit too. So they're just counting on a lot of ifs. And, Jordan Matthews is what he is. He's not a superstar, but they did trade a known commodity. So
Yeah, that's completely fair, Tony. I mean, you're 100% right. The Eagles have a whole bunch of ifs playing receiver, and that said, look, there's a lot of room for growth. I mean, if Alshon hits, man, that's going to be an awesome weapon. Because one of the things you said was Jordan Matthews was his favorite target. Yeah, he was until he got Alshon Jeffrey. You know what I mean? Like,
oh, absolutely, yeah.
So like, of course, but and you said it right. Torrey Smith, twilight of his career, he's a 9-route guy, and that's it. Nelson Aguilar, we'll find out pretty quick. But if you really want to know how much faith the Eagles have in these guys, there's a reason when they signed Torrey Smith, and there's a reason when they signed Alshon, they got them both on essentially prove me deals. Both of them are really on 1-and-1s. So I mean, obviously the Eagles are showing right there we're not really confident in what we have there. But I'm okay with trading Jordan Matthews. I'm going to flip this real quick. I love what the Bills did here, man. I mean, this is just a home run pick. The Bills are going to have 6 picks in the top 100 next year, essentially. So if somehow the Bills don't get the number 1 overall pick and they really want Darnold or any of the quarterbacks, they have the ammo to go ahead and trade up now. So for the Bills' sake, I love it. And I mean, really, Jordan Matthews, if he shows you something, great. Look, you didn't need a surefire receiver right now. You needed a guy who was going to develop into one. So if you want to give Jordan Matthews the opportunity to try out for the team, essentially, and then if he hits, you sign a new contract, that's what the Eagles did with Timmy Jernigan too.
Yeah. You kind of mentioned the Eagles are essentially counting on either Matt Collins or Nelson Aguilar or one of the 2 free agents to basically step up and be like, okay, I'm going to be part of your future. and it's just an absolute risk for sure. But yeah, I also agree with what the Bills are doing. If I'm a team in the league right now who doesn't believe that you have your franchise quarterback, I'm probably tanking because I guess I'll go on the record now. I think that Darnold kid from USC is probably the best quarterback prospect maybe since Luck. I think he's legit, and yeah, I would rather just tank this year than win 4 games and get Darnold if I were the Bills.
I mean, I think that's fair, Tony. I would kind of push back a little bit on you, and I say that because I don't think Donald's as good as Winston or Mariota. I mean, I like both of those guys more than Donald as of right now, but of course, we get a whole year. I like Josh Allen, too, out of Wyoming. Um, when I look at Josh Allen play, this is going to probably make a lot of people laugh, but he reminds me of a non-fat Ben Roethlisberger. That's athletic too. Like he does really well in the pocket. He's got a good strong arm. I like him a lot. So similar to what we talked about in the last couple of years, it's okay to tank if there's multiple quarterbacks in the draft. If there's one quarterback in the draft, that's a big gamble because if you don't have everything and you go all in on that one quarterback, you're going to trade a lot. So for two quarterbacks, it's not as much of a price to trade up for two and get Allen or Donald or even Rosen if you really like Rosen from UCLA. So I like what they did. Now, when we took the defensive side of the ball here, Tony, you talked about it. The defensive ends in Brandon Graham is a little older than most people realize. So Barnett here, he's got a great opportunity to really grow. Personally, for me, I was a big fan of the draft pick. I thought he was a really nice player. And even when you're looking at his sacks, he's not getting sacks off of just single rush moves. He's getting them off of first and second rush moves. Now, on the initial surface, you think, oh, well, he should get it off the first rush move. Well, realistically, in the NFL, you got to be able to have a counter move and a third move, too. So I love the fact that he's already being able to show that. I'm a big Derek Barnett fan. I think it's going to be a great pick for the Birds.
Yeah, that was kind of his MO from what scouts and stuff would say coming out of the draft when the Eagles took him. Basically, a lot of people said, he might be a tiny bit undersized. He might not be the most explosive. He might not be the strongest, but he has great technique. You always hear motor, and almost every single scout would always mention his hands. Always talking about his hands, how he uses his hands, like a 10-year veteran. Blah blah blah. With Chris Long in there, who also is known for using his hands, 32-year-old Brandon Graham, you think that Barnett would only get better, learn from those guys, and just, he probably could gain maybe 5 or 10 pounds still. Yeah, I think, Barnett was kind of the safe, non-sexy pick. A lot of people wanted the linebacker from Alabama. Obviously, there were some injury issues there with him. So they probably got a pretty darn good pass rusher, I think, for the next.
Yeah. And let's talk real quick about Chris Long, Tony. Not only did they bring in a vet there as defensive end to kind of obviously help a player grow and help a player learn more about how he can really unlock his skill set, but Chris Long is one of the most outspoken activists in the NFL. Not even really talking about necessarily his actions there. He showed with Malcolm Jenkins a couple of weeks ago or last week now. But even like the other stuff you've seen, when he was back in St. Louis, he was really, really active with the homeless community. There's a really cool E60 he did on him going under and living a life of a homeless man and getting a better idea of what it was like. He's really, really impactful in his big nonprofit Water Boys, help bring clean water. So, Tony, Chris Long, he's also a little bit of a PR lightning rod. He could be a great guy for your team. But, if you're a team who really wants to stay off the map and doesn't really want to get into talking about public figures, I could see marketing and PR departments being a little worried about Chris Long this season. I personally love him, but I also understand the NFL, they say, look, we want people to think of the NFL and sell money, sell jerseys, and win games. We don't necessarily want to see them. Not everyone's like that. Personally, I think that's stupid. I think these guys are professional players. Use your platform for some good. But do you think that's a fair concern that some teams might have or the Eagles might have with Chris Long, Tony?
I think there's probably a handful, maybe more than a handful of owners who don't want their players to stand up for let's call it social injustice or things they believe in. But I do believe that half of the owners look at it the other way and understand that, yeah, might it piss off a small part of the fan base? It might, but want those fans? Do you really want people wearing Eagles jerseys that, quality and things of that nature? I will say that, yeah, even before the events in Charlottesville, if you follow Chris Long on Twitter, you put it well, he's a lot more than a football player. Him and Torrey Smith kind of become two of my favorite Eagles over the past few months without ever playing. Torrey Smith is also another guy about social issues. Sometimes he gets into politics, sometimes he doesn't. But the stuff that happened in Charlottesville, it really has nothing to do with politics at all. Unfortunately, our president tried to make it political. But, I think what Chris Long did to put his arm around Malcolm Jenkins, what Justin Britt did with Michael Bennett, same type of deal. I hope we see more of that because, as Chris Long, kind of said, it's time for and nothing's going to change essentially if white people don't start, backing up their black brothers. I think it's a step in the right direction.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how you can't. I mean, really, I'm a big fan of everything that he stood for. I love not only what he did is one thing, but when you look into what Chris Long's off-the-field stuff is, the way he goes out and to do things, he's not a talk-the-talk guy. He does it all. I mean, and then I loved his comments he made. He said, look, I would never personally kneel for the flag. That's not, that's not my thing. He goes, however, I understand there's social injustice, and I understand that I'm here to support my brother. So I love what he did there. I think that's going to be a really cool thing to kind of see how the NFL continues. But I like the Chris Long signing, to kind of bring it all back to football now. I like the Chris Long signing, Derek Barnett. And the thing I'm going to kind of circle here with the Eagles, I just want to see how does the linebacker core develop, because we already know about the concerns at corner. I mean, realistically, those concerns are going to be here today, and they're going to be there in Week 16. I don't think it's going to be solved this offseason. So I think we almost kind of need to just say, hey, we're going to take our lumps out there. I'm looking at the linebackers, Tony. Do you have a concern with them stopping the run at all this year?
Yes. Well, first of all, before we even get to the linebackers, the four guys in front of them are pass rushers, plain and simple.
Good point.
They're obviously good after the quarterback, and that's fine. That's all well and dandy. But yeah, their depth is scary. Jordan Hicks, when he's on the field, he's very good, but he has trouble staying on the field. Guy. But after that, you have a linebacker and Michael Kendricks, who's making a ton of money. His skill set is going after the quarterback. Coordinator who doesn't like to blitz, like almost ever, which is extremely frustrating. Because really, after Kendricks, you really have a bunch of guys. Najee Good is really a special teamer. Joe Walker is, I guess, kind of an interesting one. He last year, then got hurt. They also have that Geary kid from Nebraska they're trying to turn into a linebacker, but he's more of a linebacker safety hybrid type. So, yeah, there's, the league is turning into a two-linebacker league. So, you're really talking about two guys on the field most of the time. Certainly concerned with depth at linebacker and certainly concerned about stopping the run. The team gets ahead this year. They understand the front seven is built to rush the passer. There's a little light up front. Cox can stop the run too, but Jernigan is definitely, an up-the-field guy, so are their ends. So definitely can get pushed around a little bit if a team decides to.
Well, that's always been Jim Schwartz's MO. I mean, he's always wanted to get pressure with four. That's always been his defensive style. And here's the thing. They have four good pass rushers, potentially there. And, right. I mean, look, we can poke fun at Vinny Curry as much as we want, but you know what? That's a better option than a lot of teams have as their third defensive end. You know what I mean? So right there, if they're four defensive front, they can get after the quarterback, but you're going to play the Cowboys. And the Cowboys are one of those teams who offensively isn't really, I don't want to say adapting with the times per se. They're not going to spread. They're saying, okay, we understand that more and more teams are going with speed. We're going to go more and more power. So, you have those two games right there. Hey, the Redskins, yes, they're a little bit of a running back by committee situation, but they still want to be a physical team inside too. Giants have a couple, concerns in the run game as well. But look, I mean, 4 games right there. And honestly, the NFC East is a damn hard division this year. So if you can't stop the run, the passing game to me is secondary. I've always been a mindset of, hey, stop the run and we'll figure out the pass later. You can't go the other way, at least to me personally. So my bigger concerns with the Eagles is, can they stop the run? If they can, we'll figure out the pass later, but we got to stop the run first and foremost. And I'm a little concerned about the depth at linebacker here.
Yeah, I don't think it's a secret of what teams are going to try to do. The Eagles' defense this year, they're going to try to control the line of scrimmage with running the ball, and they're going to take shots at whoever's lined up across from Ronald Darby, meaning Jalen Mills, Rasul Douglas, C.J. Smith, Pat Travis, whoever it may be. That's whoever that corner is on the field at that time is going to be considered the weak link. And if you could get a Des Bryant on one of those guys, or if you could get an Odell Beckham Jr. on one of those guys, it could be a long day, because if you can't stop the run and then you can't stop the other team's best passing option, then it's going to be hard to stop anything.
Yeah, and you know what? That's really what you don't want to get your second-year quarterback into a NASCAR kind of offensive game, because then he naturally starts to get to the point, I got to push the ball down the field, I got to do things, try to make too much happen. Now all of a sudden we're getting turnovers. Now the defense is back on the field, and it becomes that quicksand kind of approach of a football game.
And they already unfairly did that to him last year. He set an Eagles franchise record for most passing attempts. That's absurd for an 8-year veteran, much less a rookie. And it also shows, obviously, if you're passing the ball that often, it also shows that you're usually behind. So let's hope he doesn't ever break that record, because that'll probably be a bad sign if he's passing the ball even more this year.
That's a good point, Tony. So let's kind of spin this forward. Expectations for the Eagles this season. What do you have, Tony? This can be anything from what you think the record's going to be. Do you think they're going to be a playoff team, or even like personal expectations? What do you think some of these guys are going to hit or aren't going to hit for some of the Eagles players this year?
Well, I think I mentioned it before. I'm not sure if we were recording it or not, but to me, really the most important things about the Eagles this year, it's basically 2 things. Number one, to me, is super obvious. Wentz, as long as we see significant improvement, you always talk about that first year to second year with quarterbacks, improvement, and the Eagles essentially are headed in the right direction. Number 2 would be the defense. You also want to see that defense take a big step forward. And if you want to have number 3, which is probably just as important, Doug Peterson. I don't know if I want to say Doug Peterson's on the hot seat, but we've talked about this before too. If, for example, a guy like John Harbaugh is on the market this following year, then Doug Peterson might have to worry. If the Eagles go 7-9 this year and Wentz doesn't take a step forward, then Doug Peterson might have to worry. There's already a lot of people who don't think Doug Peterson is here for the long haul anyway. Think he's essentially a stopgap. I certainly am not a believer in Doug Peterson at this point. He's done really nothing to make me think he's that guy. But he has done anything quite egregious enough yet to be let go after the shorter time. So basically, you just want to see improvement. I don't really want to put I'm thinking they're going to be around 500, 7-9, 8 or 8, 9-7. Do they have a chance to make the playoffs? That's what everybody's asking. Oh, are they going to make the playoffs? Yeah, there's a chance to make the playoffs, but that doesn't mean that they're anywhere close to being a Super Bowl contending type team. I mean, maybe they a couple balls bounce their way and they get to 10-7 and win division at 10-7 because the Cowboys crumble without Ezekiel Elliott for 6 games, and You know what I mean? There's ways stuff can happen, but I would say chances no, they're not going to make the playoffs.
I think that's a really fair expectation, Tony. I think they're probably a 500 teams looking on the outside looking in. Look, the NFC South, all four of those teams right there are Super Bowl contenders, realistically. I could argue, maybe not the Saints, but I could argue all four of those Super Bowl contenders. Packers, Seahawks, Lions, Vikings, all those teams are right there that deserve it. And then you look in the NFC East, and realistically, every one of those teams in the NFC East, I can argue could win the division, and I also could argue could finish dead last. So I have a hard time, with going with a second-year quarterback and saying, yes, I think that they're going to be a 10-6 team win the division. I don't think that's realistic. Ronald Darby, I think expectations for him is understand the fact right now, if you, as an Eagles fan, are sitting down and thinking Ronald Darby is going to shut down half the field and be a cornerback one in the NFL, you are setting yourself up for failure. I mean, that's just the truth. Like, you can't go into that mindset. Derek Barnett, if he gets 6 sacks, that's really good. That'll put him in the mix for Eagles rookie defensive end or defensive players with most sacks. That's realistic there too. And Wentz, look, if he's going to be a over 20 touchdown and under 10 interceptions, I would say 12 to 8 interceptions. That's very good. Under 8 is elite. If he's more than 12, I'm a little worried about the development for the Eagles.
Yeah, I mean, well, first I'll touch on Darby. Yeah, I completely agree. I just probably one of my biggest fears this year is that the Delaware Valley puts a ton of expectations on Ronald Darby. Think he's going to shut down Des Bryant and Odell Beckham Jr., et cetera, et cetera. And then when push comes to shove every Sunday, he's getting beat. But because they're not giving him help and he's on guys that he's simply overmatched against. And then the city turns on him and he loses all of his confidence, kind of like what happened to Namdi, Byron Maxwell, et cetera, et cetera. We've kind of sort of seen the situation before. I do think Darby is better than those two guys. He finally is a cornerback that fits Jim Schwartz's system. But, yeah, like we said, realistically on a good team, he's a number 2 or even a number 3. So there's that. And, yeah, with Wentz, the thing with Wentz, I don't want to get too I don't look too much at his stats only because his stats have to improve since last year, almost by default. I mean, not just for the fact that he's not a rookie anymore, but the fact that he actually has weapons to throw to this year. He has a legit receiver in Jeffrey. He has a legit deep threat in Torrey Smith. You would think Zach Ertz could be somewhat of a safety valve, so to speak, kind of replacing Jordan Matthews in that role. You still have Sproles. Really, the biggest kind of X factor, I think, so to speak, is what Blunt could do, kind of controlling the middle of the field in that running game. Don't expect Blunt to get anywhere close to 18 touchdowns again. Don't expect him to run the ball for 5 yards a carry or anything. But if they simply just give him the damn ball and run fucking straight forward, every once in a while, it'll make all the fucking difference in the world. I swear. Because they don't, like, even in the 2 preseason games, everything, for the most part, at least I've seen, is off tackle, counter, blah, blah, blah. And you see the linebackers and the safeties in the middle of the field just not respecting anything, up front in the middle at all whatsoever. And it would just open up so much. We've talked about this in the past before with Andy Reid. That's why people, say Peterson is an Andy Reid clone. They need some semblance of a running game, and if it's not Blunt, then Corey Clement, showed a little flashes last week. Maybe he could step up. I think Smallwood is what he is, but they just need to make an effort to run the ball, even if it's only a couple yards. It's just doing it.
Yeah, I mean, no, I forget.
Sorry, lag. I'm worried we're gonna see way too many 47 pass, 14 run games, and where Peterson abandons the run in the middle of the second quarter when they're only down a touchdown. Shit like that can't happen. Like, it just can't. I don't care if they're only getting 2 yards a pop. They still need to do it.
Oh yeah, I forget I heard this on some talk shows. Like running the football is like eating your vegetables. You don't really ever get excited about it, but you just have to do it. I mean, I get it, and I think LeGarrette Blount, he's always been a dot back. His skill is always going forward, not first step lateral. Now that said, in Oregon, that's a lot of what Oregon was. But when you really simplify what Oregon's offense was an inside power run system. They run a ton of power. They run a ton of counter. They just kind of made it look pretty. So I don't think LeGarrette Blount. I'm not saying he can't be successful, but I am a little skeptical. Personally, for me, I really am not a fan of Pumphrey. I think his expectations are way too high. What people are giving him and knowing him that he's going to be the next Darren Sproles. Realistically, all he has in common with Darren Sproles is he's a short guy and was very productive in college. Okay, I get that. But his production is not the same as Sproles. Pumphrey wasn't this receiving threat out of the backfield at San Diego State that everyone thinks that he is. Pumphrey didn't return kicks, didn't return punts the way that Sproles can. So to me, I'm like, okay, hey, I've seen this song and dance before where a guy is unbelievably talented in college, but maybe is a little concerned about height, weight, speed, etc., and he might not be as professionally ready. So I'm not a big Pumphrey fan. I'm not really ready to say that, oh, he's going to be the next coming of Sproles like a lot of guys have. So I want to see what the run game looks like. But in short, Tony, that's really everything I have on Eagles' expectations for this year. Do you have anything else you want to touch on?
Yeah, just to touch on the run game again, like you said, it's the run game is kind of similar to pitching, and where you're trying to keep the hitter off balance. Well, the run game in the NFL in a lot of ways is just to keep the defense off balance. Um, and I feel like just again going back to the Andy Reid era, we would see time and time again, that'd just be a very frustrating element or non-element of the Eagles' offense.
Yeah.
About Pumphrey, yeah, I totally agree with everything you said about him. I think he was a fifth-round pick, so the Eagles kind of took a shot and saying, oh, maybe, possibly he could be Sproles' replacement. But one thing I think a lot of people realized pretty quickly at camp was, yeah, he's not Darren Sproles. First of all, Darren Sproles is short, but he's not small. Darren Sproles is about as wide as Mack Truck. He's just about 5'7". Pumphrey is not that. Pumphrey is just a little. He's built like a shortstop. I mean, he's like 5'8", 175 pounds. He looks like a middle infielder. Tiny legs, and he does not have those amazing feet that Darren Sproles has. I mean, he's quick. Don't get me wrong. He's quicker than the average guy in the field. He's quicker than the average running back. But he doesn't, unless there's some kind of injury there that we don't know about, he doesn't have that special burst, that special quickness or elusiveness. And another thing, and some people have mentioned cautioning, San Diego State had 3 guys on that offensive line make it to the NFL. I think two got drafted and one signed and is still with somebody right now. So, and again, you look at a lot of Pumphrey's highlights. He was running through, lanes. They were bulldozing lanes for him. So he might be somebody they missed on. But the undrafted kid Corey Clement, maybe he actually takes Pumphrey's roster spot. He's more of a hammer type, so he'd be kind of like Blunt's replacement or Blunt's backup in that role.
Yeah,
we'll see.
I mean, look, it's a 5th-round pick. You pretty much know when you go in the 5th-round pick, it's, hey, we're gonna draft the guy and let's see if he makes the roster. And if he makes the roster, maybe it's a chance to start. If the chance to start, maybe something special. So there's a lot of ifs when you draft in 5th-round picks. It's not like they drafted him in the 1st round. So I'm not condemning the Eagles for taking it. I just want to make sure people are putting the realistic expectation that this is not a guy who's just going to walk in, take Darren Sproles' spot.
Right.
All right, Tony, let's switch it up here. Let's talk a little college football. All right, so off top of your head, Tony, let's say you get 5 college coaches, all right, and you're starting a program tomorrow. What are 5 college football coaches that you would want tomorrow to start your program?
Oh, man. Well, I guess I would have to go Saban number 1.
Okay.
Well, you go. Who would be your number 2 then after Saban?
So I would probably put Harbaugh. look, you can't argue what he's done at Michigan has been nothing short of remarkable in the turnaround that he has. So he, to me, is probably my number two. Who would you go if you're three then?
Yeah, Harbaugh was definitely someone who came to mind. Hate to say it because I feel like he's kind of a douchebag, but probably Jimbo Fisher. I mean, what he's done at Florida State, it is what it is. So I'd probably go him number three.
Yeah, I mean, when you win national championships, you can be any type of man, but in the end of the day, if you're winning games, that's what it is. I think when it comes to coaching, everyone wants to see the wins, but no one really wants to see how it's made. And I think that's fair for Jimbo. So four for me is Urban Meyer. I mean, I probably taken Meyer ahead of Jimbo, but I think those are four. So now we're at the fifth spot, Tony. So who's your fifth guy?
Yeah, college sports is kind of like sausage, man. Most
Spot
people
on.
like.
100% right.
Yeah, Urban Meyer's a good one. I actually, now that I think of it, I might go Urban Meyer before Jimbo Fisher. Five. I want to go with my boy Jeff just because, but let's be realistic now. uh, well, I mean, if we're going super recently, and it is a what have you done for me now type of business, and let's call it a business, then I'm not going to say his name, but you have to go with the guy at Penn State.
And that's exactly why I asked this
I
question
mean,
because
Franklin, I don't know. He's one of those guys. I feel like you hear him talk and you're like, nah. But then you see his team on the field and you're like, okay. I mean, he almost got ran out of Happy Valley right away. But now all of a sudden they think he's the second coming of that other guy. So.
Well, I mean, Tony, you and me were standing next to each other at one point, and we were talking about the Temple Penn State game where Temple had 10 sacks on him, on Christian Sackenberg. Okay, so when Temple had those 10 sacks, I remember specifically, I turned to you and I said, I think Temple might have just fired James Franklin. Like, that was a very realistic conversation that a lot of people were having. And what Franklin has done in that turnaround has been nothing short of miraculous. Now, obviously, both of us are Temple alums, so obviously we're going to have a little bit of bias here. But let's be fair. What that team was when Temple played them and beat them was largely based on not having full scholarship players. So you have to acknowledge that. I mean, look, Franklin right now with his new contract, he's a top 5 highest paid NCAA football coach. And to me, he's earned every freaking penny of that job, man.
Yeah, he finally has a quarterback that fits his system, which I think might be the most kind of non-talked about thing in the turnaround, so to speak. Hackenberg was the great prospect coming out, but really when it came down to it, it was fitting a square peg in a round hole when it came to James Franklin's offense for him. Penn State, I feel like if Penn State really wants to get back to, a perennial top 10 program like it used to be under Paterno, then it's really going to have to go back to its roots, its meats and potatoes, and that's kind of what they're doing again with the defense. And I'm talking about defensively, getting those kids from Jersey, getting those kids from Maryland, getting those kids from Pennsylvania who love nothing more than to get after the quarterback, hit people, smack them around, and play an intimidating, tough style of defense. And then as long as Franklin has a running back and a quarterback who can move a little bit, they'll be able to move the ball enough. And I think you're starting to see Penn State kind of trend back in that direction. I think that's the kind of teams that they want to have, and then the kind of teams that they could win with. I mean, look at kind of Temple's. I don't want to call it a renaissance because they were never really there, but what Temple had their improvement over the past handful of years, that's really what it's come down to. At tough, you recruit your backyard, and generally speaking, kids from Jersey, kids from Pennsylvania, Maryland, New York, Delaware, they like to hit people, like to play defense. You just look at the brand of football in the Northeast compared to down south, Midwest. It's not as wide open. It's not as, I think speed is more of a factor down south just for whatever reason. But it is what it is.
No, I mean, you're 100% right. I had the opportunity to talk with a guy who used to coach at Ohio State. He coached defensive backs for Ohio State. And I asked him once about geographical recruiting, exactly what you're kind of alluding to, Tony. He said, hey, when I needed guys in the trenches, I looked for the Northeast and I looked for the northern Midwest. So I looked in Wisconsin and places like that. But when I needed speed and I need guys on the edge, that's where I dipped into the South. So that's a very fair thing. And I think realistically, James Franklin, first 2 years of Penn State, 7-6, and then all of a sudden, boom, 11 wins last year. And realistically, they should have won the Rose Bowl last year. I mean, just a boneheaded interception throw at the end. Penn State was on that way to really win the Rose Bowl. And then if they would have won the Rose Bowl, my God, I mean, the turnaround that people would have really been thinking about Penn State, and they would have gotten more credit than they deserve. Realistically, whether they won the Rose Bowl or not doesn't matter to me. I mean, what Penn State's turned around has been nothing short of impressive. Realistically, they're a national threat this year. They're very realistically should win the Big Ten this year or be in that top 3 mix with Michigan and Ohio State, and then national contention. They win the Big Ten. Look out, man. I mean, it's realistic that they're going to be one of those 4 teams playing for the big one.
Yeah, I would assume Penn State is going to be preseason top 5 or 10, I would think. They have arguably the best running back in the country. You would think they're going to have a top 20 defense, and they have a quarterback that they could at least count on, rely on, to do what they need him to do, not turn over the ball. I feel like just because of where they are in the program, they don't quite have that talent level depth-wise as, certainly the Alabamas and schools like that. But they certainly can compete with anybody, and they're absolutely a threat. And
well, to be fair, they don't have the talent depth-wise because they never had the scholarship depth-wise. So now that they do, now realistically, hey, there's no reason they shouldn't be. I mean, you kind of talked about this earlier, about the difference of speed and power. Bama has never shied away from being a power team. They've always said, like, yeah, we understand we're in the SEC and we're in the South, but we're nasty. And that's really what Penn State wants to be too, defensively and offensively. Let Ohio State, let Michigan get cute on offense. But Penn State's in that process now, building up the defense, building up the offense, more scholarships to give out, and just physically outwear them. I mean, you saw it. When Ohio State played Penn State last year, in that fourth quarter, Ohio State was tired of getting punched in the mouth by Penn State. That's flat out what it was.
Yeah, and, another thing, both of us are Temple guys, but both of us also know a ton of guys from Penn State. And, everything that's happened with Penn State and, over the past, 5-7 years, whatever it's been, I think a lot of people have kind of forgotten that there are still some good people at Penn State, and that, Penn State isn't a 50,000 pedophiles. 99% of people from Penn State are, good people. It just happens that horrible stuff happened, and majority of people have no say whatsoever over that. And it is a great campus. It's certainly a great football tradition that a black guy or mark or asterisk, whatever you want to call it, that'll never go away. Never should go away. But time to stop reverting back to that, because even a lot of our Temple friends and stuff, no matter what, will always go back to Sandusky and everything that happened there, and it's kind of unfair to the current team and everything, because when it came down to it, we're talking about, how many people were actually involved in that? A dozen-ish. I don't know what the number is, but.
No, you're 100% right, Tony. And my beef always is with the NCAA and the fact that they have yet to find a way to penalize the guilty parties. They penalize the university and the students, but that doesn't mean it's the guilty parties. That's the problem. And that was unfortunately what NCAA came down on Penn State, and it's because realistically they don't have any governance. They don't have any policies right now to penalize the guilty parties. Unfortunately, as disgusting as it is to say, there was no way the NCAA could get involved. So initially for me, I had a little bit of a problem with the way the NCAA handled the situation. That said, I also understood why the NCAA did it, because they said, look, you are showing that your institution and your leadership structure has lacked the ability to make important decisions in your life, i.e. we're going to come in and we're going to hammer you for this stuff. Now, obviously, since then, it's been a complete changeover. Penn State is a completely new situation. I agree with you, Tony. There's no reason they shouldn't be in the top 5, for next season, preseason. It's good to see Penn State be back again. As far as a general football fan, it's good when programs like Penn State, Texas is another one now on the rise again. LSU looks like on the rise again. It's USC on the rise again. It's good for when these big programs are on the up and up. But the one thing I'm a little curious about, what's this going to do for Pitt and Temple recruiting? Because realistically, 2 or 3 years ago, Penn State, while they didn't have a ton of scholarships, they were trying to recruit with Pitt and Temple. Now they don't have to anymore. So I'm just curious to see, does this mean now that Temple and Pitt should have a better recruiting process and in turn their programs are going to be better? Or is it fair to say that student athletes in the state of Pennsylvania were now choosing to go to Pitt instead of Penn State because Pitt at the time was a better program for those 2 to 3 seasons? So I'm kind of curious to see how that's going to work out.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. It's kind of a two-sided coin. It's, on one hand, it's supply and demand when it comes to, top-level recruits and athletes. On the other hand, it's like keeping up with the Joneses. If Penn State is going to be a perennial top 10 program, then Temple and Pitt are going to want to be respectable as well. To me, if the 3 schools are smart, they'll go back to the days when all 3 played each other every single year. And that will benefit all 3 parties immensely, in my opinion. If Penn State be the big dog, then they'll beat Temple and Pitt every year. And if Temple or Pitt ever want to, make the next step on the same level as Penn State and, win some of those games. To me, that blows my mind that the 3 schools, for so long didn't play each other every year. I understand, the reasons behind it, but I'm a firm believer that would truly help all 3 schools.
Yeah, I
but
think so.
I also don't really foresee it happening in the near future either, at least with Pitt, because I feel like Pitt might be the one that pushes against that for whatever reason. Because I'm pretty sure Temple and Penn State want to keep playing. I'm pretty sure they want to, have another contract, but we'll see.
Yeah, I know Pitt and Penn State haven't played in a really long time versus each other, and they are playing versus each other this year. That's a bigger rivalry, a much bigger rivalry on both sides versus Temple and Penn State. I don't think Penn State people really view the Temple side as a real rival. Temple definitely feels that way, but Penn State doesn't. So Pitt-Penn State this year would be interesting. I think for the general good of the game, and this is me not saying this as a biased Temple fan, I think it would be good for for Pitt to beat Penn State, but Penn State still to run the table and have a good year. I mean, realistically, it'd be great if all 3 teams – and I think of how rare this is. The state of Pennsylvania potentially could have 3 conference champions in one state. I mean, that's freaking rare to say. And it's not like, they're playing the Sun Belt. I mean, the Americans certainly isn't exactly the same pedigree as the Big Ten or the ACC, but the Big Ten and the ACC are 2 of the best programs in the country. And I would argue the Americans probably the 6th best, maybe the 7th best, depending on how you do the Mountain West. So realistically, Pennsylvania football and college on the up and up. So very excited about what I see our home state's going to do this year, Tony.
Yeah, absolutely. And for, all the fellow Temple fans out there, it hurt when Matt Rule left, but Jeff Collins is certainly doing and saying all the right things right now. Obviously, we'll see the fruit of his labor on the field pretty soon here, but I don't know. Something tells me he's another good one. Jeff Collins.
Yeah, I mean, I've got nothing to. I mean, I'm at this point where the only thing I can say that I like about him is he's freaking crushing it in recruiting. I mean, Temple is doing unbelievable in recruiting. I don't think it's a coincidence that you're looking at their social media stuff and they're way more interactive on social media than they've ever been. That's a huge thing for the recruiting standpoint too. So, yeah, for Coach Collins, he's off to a great start, but everyone's off to a great start in June and July. I need to see what we can do in September and October. But short Tony here, look, James Franklin, to me, I think he's probably a top 5 coach in the NCAA. He's getting paid like one. I think the guy that is probably getting a little disrespect on our list, and this is a shame on both of us, the guy that won the national championship last year in Dabo Swinney, you have to argue he's in that mix too. But, I mean, look, Penn State's on the rise again. I think it's good for football. I think it's good for the NCAA. And that's really all I wanted to kind of chat today about the Penn State and Lions.
Yeah, I agree. Dabo definitely is a guy we should have mentioned. I mean, there's a handful of other names we could have mentioned too. When it comes down to, when a college opening comes about, though, it's a lot of it has to do with fit. So, the best coach in the country might not necessarily be the best coach for school A, whereas it might be the best coach for school B.
Oh, 100%. I mean, look at a guy like David Shaw. His intellect and his quiet, calm reserve at Stanford's a perfect. You put Saban there, that would not be a great dynamic that way.
That's a great point. Totally. Yeah, and the thing, I don't know if you want to just kind of to wrap up everything, I'm almost at the point where I don't even watch preseason games anymore because sometimes they're just more misleading than anything. I mean, I'm a football junkie, so I can't just not do that. But part of me wishes that these 4 preseason games get canceled and turn into scrimmages or something, blah blah blah. But that's a whole different episode that we can get into.
Man, no one knows how to make money like the NFL. I mean, that's flat out what it is. I mean, that's what preseason's for. Yes, obviously it's for guys making teams, but realistically, we televise it because the NFL wants to make money. The NFL draft is outside now because the NFL wants to make money. The NFL can print their own money. So that's why, Tony, I hear what you're saying, but the NFL knows what they're doing in terms of how to bring in a little more revenue.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, we saw at was it maybe last week or 2 weeks ago, some dude some dude proposed to his girlfriend at the Miami Dolphins preseason game. And I mean, it sucks for her, but like all I could think about was you would never see somebody propose at a baseball spring training game or an NBA preseason game. Football is the only preseason sport. See some douchebag propose to his girlfriend, but whatever. I wish him the best.
In short, to wrap our whole summary up, what we have learned is football is the only sport romantic enough for you to propose at a preseason exhibition game.
What? I don't know about romantic enough, but sure, we'll go with it.
Awesome. Tony, any other closing comments you want to make today, bud, before we wrap things up and close it down?
Rhys Hoskins, watch and enjoy. I don't even know if you know who that is, but that's fine. He's the Phillies' first baseman of the future. It's fucking awesome.
Oh, yeah, baseball is still happening.
Yeah. How about that?
All right, guys. Well, I appreciate everyone taking your time. We've already taken up way too many of your valuable seconds to talk about baseball right there. I promise I will try to do as little talk about baseball as possible. Thanks for doing, guys. We appreciate it. Take care.
Later.